Now, is America disintegrating? And if it is, it's been coming for a long time. Now, the longtime White House correspondent Brian Karim writes a weekly column for Salon. Now, there are those who think the United States will not survive the current existential crisis that we're going through. Now, one of those people is former Illinois Congressman Joe Walsh. He spoke on a podcast called the Just Ask the Question on Wednesday. Walsh had said he believes that we could see the U.S. split into several countries during the next 25 years and during the lifetime of our children, he said. Sooner than that, Walsh sees a third major political party rise into power. He hopes it will become a dominant centrist party that will unify the country and prevent the worst case scenario. Now, Walsh is not the first to show such dire concerns about the path that this country is heading. There are many who question our national direction and believe that we have never been divided as we are now, or we have not at least we have not been divided since the beginning of the Civil War. Now, on a personal note, um, back in 1968, and the riots that happened at the Democratic Convention in Chicago, when Mayor Daley's cops beat people, which included many Black Panthers, during that same year, the Tet Offensive in the Vietnam War happened, and that was also the same year that we lost Bobby Kennedy and Martin Luther King, and the same year North Korea captured the USS Pueblo. Apollo 8 circled the moon. Then we had the My Lai massacre that occurred in Vietnam, and thousands of students protested the war, where older Americans pronounced America love it or leave it. Tommy Smith and John Carlos bowed their heads and raised their black gloved fist, recognizing the Black Power movement during the playing of the national anthem when they received the Olympic medals in Mexico City and Richard Nixon won the White House. Now we are divided, but we have been divided for most of our lifetime, and at least now we're not mired in a seemingly unending war. The trepidation now comes after decades of divisive politics, beginning with Nixon and the emergence of the far right movement, which came under the age of Ronald Reagan. Now, along with supply side economics and the destruction of the unions. Now, ultimately today, the biggest perceived division is between the rural and urban voters. Those who believe the disintegration of the country to be inevitable was to see Donald Trump and not as a cause but a symptom, and believe that poor communication and the ignorance it has spawned are the fuel stoked in the fires of dissolution. The immediate results of this problem included the very real fear that the Democrats would lose their advantage in the House and Senate in this year's midterm. Now, Walsh, among others, included many Democrats, blamed Joe Biden for not effectively communicating the problems that we face, but our democracy is still hanging by a thread, and the argument goes, and we're not facing it or refusing to do so. Now, putting this aside, the walls of the White House from staffers with some experience, it's basically we've heard it from Democrats and Republicans who represent us in Congress. After Biden got an infrastructure deal passed, he held a bipartisan celebration on the White House South Lawn. Nearly 1,000 people attended. It was a historic victory, but since Biden signed that bill back in November, it's been almost forgotten. And part of that is because of the pandemic and the problems that are going on in Ukraine. But as Biden's critics point out, it's also because the administration has quit beating the drum about the victory by hyping the Build Back Better agenda Congress failed to pass. The Build Back Better is apparently dead, yet as recently as this week, the White House continued to tell us otherwise. Now, why some people want to know, doesn't Biden merely focus on the infrastructure and the pandemic? Um, why is he so scattered, and why is his communication so poor? More importantly, why are the Democrats fighting among themselves, and don't they get it? All of those questions circle anyone who seeks answers in Washington D.C. It wasn't Joe Biden who created the miscommunication and ignorance that continues to drive us all apart, and it would be unfair to expect him to shoulder all full responsibility too. He's just a symptom of the problem. A, there's a guy there's an idiot that listens to Joe Rogan, and he basically a podcast a podcast basically a podcast host ran into this one guy who was a Joe Rogan fan during the weekend, said the United States is destroying itself and that free speech is in peril. He said it's the Democrats who are responsible and blamed cancel culture for trying to shut down the American patriot Rogan. Rogan is not a patriot. He's a fucking idiot. And no, it's not the Democrats who are trying to who are not responsible for this. This insane fan, however, supports the book bans that have regained popularity across the United States and now include the Holocaust graphic novel Moz. Basically, they tried to explain to this person that you can't defend Rogan's right to speak, and at the same time endorse banning books. That's really an Orwellian concept. Orwell's 1984 is often among the books that are banned. However, the interview subject had no idea what the fuck we were talking about. As reported in Vox recently, according to a new American Library Association report, there were 330 different book challenges last year. That was a sharp increase over recent years. Now, parents, activists, school board officials, and lawmakers around the country are challenging books at a pace that have not been seen in decades. Was a report from the New York Times. It doesn't end there. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has voiced his support of a bill to prohibit discussion of sexual orientation and gender identity in the state's primary school books. Now, this is a straightforward example of the government trying to stifle free speech. DeSantis says that speech is entirely inappropriate for teachers to have with the students. At the same time, he also endorses teaching the U.S. Constitution and what makes our country unique, all those basic stuff. The irony was entirely lost on him. Now, the attack against free speech is basically mostly aggressive, that was aggressively waged by those who claim to defend it. And it is a very attack that divides the country and perhaps will lead us into disastrous outcome that Walsh and many others are fearing. In one of Donald Trump's first appearances in the Brady briefing room at the beginning of the pandemic, which was back about 2 years ago, we asked him why he wanted to sue the New York Times over an editorial. After all, everyone has a right to their opinion, and Trump said wrong opinion. Yeah, but Trump's always wrong anyway, so that makes sense. That was also the basis for Sarah Palin's recent suit against the New York Times. Trump threw down the gauntlet and Palin picked it up, suing the Times for an opinion piece that was written in which the editors made a factual error. In the 1964 case New York Times v. Sullivan, the Supreme Court ruled that a public figure cannot sue for libel based on an honest mistake. You have to show malicious intent. When this person spoke to a judge named Jed Rakoff on a different matter a few weeks later, he mentioned he was presiding over the Palin case and noted that the Sullivan ruling was at the heart of the Palin suit. At the end, he dismissed the case, and the jury also found that Palin had not proved any malicious intent by the Times. That would seem to be a big victory for the press, but as others have noted, the assault on a free speech is not only ongoing but gathering steam. Now more challenges are sure to come, and in the end, if politicians are able to shut down the free press because we print things that they don't like, then we'll be driving down the highway toward a day when only propaganda and slogans approved by politicians can be printed, broadcast, or published on the internet. It used to be that we defended free speech in this country by saying, I may disagree with what you say, but I'll defend to the death your right to say it. Now today, we replace that with, I disagree with you, with what you say, and since I'm in power, sit down, shut the fuck up, and do what the fuck you're told. That's no way to run a railroad, but it's perfectly a good way to run a fascist dictatorship that Trump wanted. It certainly contributes to the notion that we're a divided nation headed toward a breakup, and further helps to divide it by continuing to spread lies, which is what Foe and the Republicans do. At the end of the day, the endless miscommunication and the torrent of lies told about our differences are what divides us most. Right-wing media, press releases and articles written about or for Donald Trump spout opinions like when politics becomes war, the president needs fighters. That only inflames both sides, and it would lead to the destruction of our country. It's not that people begin believing those lies. It's more that they don't know what to believe and retreat into their own comfort zone. A comfort zone filled with ignorance and fear. Yeah, that's Republicans, all right. If Wash and others are right and the country ultimately breaks apart, it will be disinformation, misinformation, and a lack of shared belief in truth that drives us free. And we have more in common than we realize, but those who seek power for their own sake don't want us to know that. So if you like the video, give the video a like and subscribe to my channel, RBW King, and also hit the notification bell so that you'll be notified when a new video comes out. And also, if you want to support my work even further, you could donate to my Patreon link on the About section for my YouTube to support the work even further.